Hey, how's it going? Welcome to our ceramic tiles tutorial for Education 4754. So for tool layout, we have our levels, we have our framing square, we have our 1/8 inch spacers, and as well as our impact driver. In this next set of tools here, we have our rubber grout float in the bottom left, the black handle. This is used to apply the grout to a ceramic tile. Above that, we have our V-notch trowel. This is used for applying the mortar to the wall. We have two sponges used to help clean the grout off the tile after it's been applied. In the bag on the right that is open, we have our black sanded grout, which is typically used for floor tile. However, for the purposes of our video and for our module, we use this grout and applied it to wall tile. And in the bag on the left that sits underneath both the trowel and the grout float, that is our mortar, which is going to be mixed and spread and applied to the wall so we can apply our ceramic tiles and stick them to the wall. Next set of tools, starting on the left we have our power drill. In the center there we have our tile cutter. And then on the right we have our mixing paddle, which will be chucked into our power drill. And together that will help mix our mortar and our grout later in the video. So starting off, getting your piece of OSB, you want to mark the center line on your OSB. So mark to the center, then you want to draw a straight line down the center. Then what you want to do is you want to mark 1 inch from the edge of your OSB. This will be your do not enter zone, so this will act as two connecting walls to your ceramic tile wall, just so you guys got some space to work with and you do not impact your tiles. Once this is done, you want to get a piece of stock if you haven't already done so. Cut it to length of your OSB. And then once we have that cut to length, we can install that, and this is going to act as our it'll be acting as our kind of a countertop, and we can also transfer our center line measurements to this piece of stock on the bottom. So you can go ahead, get your impact driver, and you can fasten this onto your OSB. Cut to length, perfect. And then once that's done, we can transfer our center line onto our piece of stock. So now we can begin to lay out our tiles. So what you see here is you see our first two tiles are matched up on our center line, on our piece of stock there. And we want to work from center, and then we want to work to the walls, to the edges, okay? So making sure we put two spacers on the ends of our tiles and two spacers in between towards the ends is the right way to do it. And then once you get your first row done, then you can mark the center line on your second row, the middle tile, because the second row is going to be offset from the first row. So once that's measured, we can line that up, place our two spacers towards the end of our tile, and we can begin to lay out our second row. You also want to make sure you're very tedious in when you lay out these tiles. So we make sure that when it does come time to cut the tiles on the ends of our OSB, we know that it's going to be accurate when we put it up on the wall. And we really try to eliminate the error before we actually begin to apply our tile to our mortar when it's on the wall. Also notice with our third row now that we've offset it again from our second row. So we're back to having two tiles on the either side of our center line. And for this tutorial, we are only doing 3 rows of tile, as we are trying to conserve tiles for the last few groups for the modules. So now our tiles are all laid out. We can begin to transfer the line from our 1-inch DNE spacing on our OSB, and we can transfer that onto our tiles. Using our framing square, make sure we do that on both sides. These are going to be lines that we can use to cut our tile with our tile cutters. So as you see here, we want to start from the bottom, apply moderate pressure on the way up, and then on the way back down, you should hear a scoring sound on the outer material of the tile, and then come back over, and you want to press down moderately, and that tile should break along that line which it was scored on. Again, start at the top, moderate pressure all the way through along your line, and then the way down you should hear a very distinct sound of that tile being scored, and then the light pressure to break. Then we can install our layout to the wall using our level to make sure it's level, and then we can jump into our mixing process. So we want to grab 4 parts of our mortar, okay, in our red solo cup, and then we can get 1 part water and add that to a clean mixing bucket. Then we can prepare mixing tools. We can add a little bit of water to our mortar first, not the entire thing. Mix it around first so we don't get a mess when we start mixing the mortar, and then progressively add little bits of water until you get a peanut butter consistency with the mortar. The mixing process, you want to straddle it with your 2 feet, making sure you're standing above, applying in a linear fashion downwards, and you want to go clockwise and then counterclockwise to make sure we're mixing it evenly. So once we've let the mortar sit for 5-10 minutes and remixed it again, then we can begin to apply it to our layout that's on the wall. With our V-notch trowel, we want to grab a moderate scoop of our mortar, and then we want to start spreading it to our surface. A good strategy for applying this mortar is to start from the bottom towards our countertop, to work it upwards so we know we can get good coverage of mortar out towards the bottom, and then we can circle it off to the left, applying moderate pressure, and we want our trowel to be at a 45-degree angle as we apply our mortar. And once we get a good enough amount of mortar onto our wall, then we can run our trowel from left to right, because we want our lines to be running parallel. So once you're happy with the mortar that you have set to your layout, we can begin to place our first layer spacers against our countertop, and we can start applying our tiling, making sure we have 2 tiles on either side of that center line for our first row, and we're just matching our layout that we had previously. When we apply our tile, you first want to make contact with the mortar, and then you want to slightly wiggle the tile up and down and left and right, just to make sure you're getting a good adhesion between the mortar and the surface of the tile. And then once that's done, you can set it up against your spacers. Remember, we're working from our center line and then out to either edge of our OSB. When we're putting tile against each other, it's important to make sure you touch the tiles first at a 45, and then when you drop that tile in, as you can see there on the tile being installed on the left, you get that correct amount of spacing between your 2 tiles, and then you can come in with the spacer after, making sure that you have them on both the ends of the tile. You can go and do your second row, making sure our spacers are spread out evenly, making sure we're touching our tiles on the edges before we decide to make full contact with the mortar, wiggling it around, and applying very solid amount of pressure to the tile as you set it to the mortar. So now that we've left that for a day for the mortar and tile to set, we can come back the next day and begin to remove our spacers from our tile. We can come in with a straight knife, and we can clean out our spaces, making sure that there's no mortar up against the wall of our tile, but making sure we're leaving the grooves of the mortar intact. So we're just doing this to clean out the mortar up against the wall of the tile. Now we want to begin to mix our grout. So again, this is a 4-to-1 part ratio. We want 4 parts grout, 1 part water. Same process as the mortar. Adding a little bit of water at a time, mixing it around first to help prevent messes when we begin mixing. Especially if you have white shoes on and you're using black grout. So we're mixing it around, and then we can go in a clockwise and counterclockwise rotation until we get a nice peanut butter consistency. So now that that is mixed, we are ready to apply. You want to apply on angles. You don't want to be applying up down. That is so that the grout catches in the grooves appropriately and you're not pulling it out of the grooves. And you also want to make sure that you're applying with a very strong pressure. A good test is to see if your forearm gets really tired. That means you're doing a really good job. Having the bucket underneath to catch the grout if it falls down is also a really good idea, as this is a very messy process. So once the majority of the grooves are filled in with grout, we can come in and clean up our edges, making sure that all the spaces have an appropriate amount of grout. And then once that's done, we can come with our middle finger and we can begin to form the grout to our grooves. Using our middle finger will help keep a consistent line, a consistent indentation, and keep everything nice and clean and tidy when we begin to clean our tiles. So once that's done, we can get a wet sponge and we can damply run across the lines of our grout after we've let it rest for a few minutes. Applying a wet sponge here is a really good way to get the grout again to form to the line that you've used with your finger. And once we've done a few passes cleaning up our lines, and we've let it set for a few minutes to let the grout on the surface dry up, we can come back in with damp paper towels and dry cloth and clean up the surfaces of our tile. And again, clean up the surfaces and our grooves and make sure everything is nice and clean and tidy. And there you have it, your final product.